All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? It's 2025. Of course, things are going really good. And to celebrate things going really, really good, I've been on Facebook a lot recently, and I just see
Right?
people posting about just pieces of shit. Like people go around the neighborhood being annoying, or like kids playing basketball in their front
Oh,
yard, or dogs
you got to get
barking.
on Nextdoor.
I created Nextdoor to categorize all these sick pieces of shit. And what would be really interesting is if I, in my just genius vigilantism, tied these people to a chair and murdered them and then cut up their pieces and dumped in Lake Michigan. You think that would be a really good
I
idea,
mean,
Brian?
you need to. I'm sick of seeing these guys in the park, these people playing pickleball. For anyone out there that doesn't know, I do live in Portland, Oregon. All these people in the park, in my park, playing pickleball. They're in their bike lanes. These are the dregs of society. And, some of us have a deep innate instinct in us to lash out. And these are the people we need to be directing that violent energy towards.
Yes, absolutely. And the series that is giving me this inspiration to do these things is a series that both you and I, Brian, loved. It's called Dexter. And you know what? I've been wanting to cover prestige TV for a long time, and I think this is the very
Yeah.
first subject of prestige TV I've wanted to review. So without further ado, before I get my sick, twisted, dark passenger urges out there real quick, let's
Nasty,
just
rotten,
nasty.
evil little.
But before I get that out there, let's review Dexter Season 1. But before we get into our review this week and our subject of Prestige TV, Brian, let's bring back our subject, cringe generational, cringe millennial, murderous
Cringe,
moment of the week.
generational moment.
Woo! Yeah! All right. And I hear somebody in a motorcycle. Now I actually want to go Dexter mode, but never mind.
Someone with their
But
exhaust,
either,
yeah.
Yeah, right. But either way, so I wanted to choose a subject that was very much related to the Dexter fandom. Now, Brian, talk about somebody, and to be fair, this person is not a millennial, but he almost is, and he's insanely cringe. Probably the most insanely cringe person who's ever been associated with a fandom that we've ever covered on the show.
I mean, I almost feel like if you're very, very into any fandom, then that almost just makes you a millennial by definition. Because fandoms are, I think, a thing that millennials really took ownership of.
Oh, yes. And this guy was very, very soy. And Brian, I know when I say the name, you probably know who I'm talking about. But Brian, for this week's Cringe Generational, Cringe Millennial segment, I want to talk about Mark Twitchell. Do you know about Mark Twitchell, Brian?
I do, actually. I do know that name.
Yes, otherwise known as the real-life Dexter killer, although
This
he
guy
sucked
rules.
at it.
I mean, this guy is very millennial coded. He made a Star Wars fan film.
Yes, he made a Star Wars fan film which had a cameo from the original live-action Boba Fett actor for some reason. He was probably just bored or some shit.
Well, and also, right, this guy made his Star Wars fan film, and then he would talk down to other people because he made a Star Wars fan film.
Yes, even though he was technically Gen X, that is very millennial. That is extremely cringe millennial. So to the audience at home who don't know who Mark Twitchell is, so he was, once again, an amateur filmmaker, made a bunch of fuck-off movies, nobody cares. He lived in Hollywood for a while. He tried making movies, basically fucking failed. He moved back to Canada because he's originally from Canada. And then he was really, really just obsessed with the TV show Dexter, which, to be fair, I have been obsessed with the TV show Dexter throughout various times in my life, but never to this level because he wanted to be like Dexter and murder just the sickest, twisted pieces of shit of all time. And that includes a guy who just happened to respond to a
ambushed a
Craigslist
guy
ad.
on a blind date. Well,
The real sickos, the people who show up to blind dates.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if you're applying Craigslist want ads, there is a 50% chance that you are a sicko. So.
That's true, but they're not quite like Dexter, who only targets regular murderers and serial killers.
We alluded to this, so listeners may remember last week we talked about pop singing sensation and child murdering pedophile David, and how he also seems to be very enamored with the character of Dexter. I'm not a Dexter scholar. I watched it really for the first time this week. Yeah, it's not something I know a lot about, but one of the things that I learned this week, it was news to me, was that Dexter actually doesn't murder just random children or guys going on dates. Is that right? Kind of a defining thing about him is that he has almost like rules. Maybe you might call it a code of conduct. And I'm not sure what people like Twitchell or David were identifying within Dexter, if not the code of conduct. Because that's the thing that defines him, right?
No, exactly. And to be fair, Dexter throughout the series, because of course you only watched most of season 1, but for the most part, Dexter does follow that code pretty well. He's failed a few times, but there's always like a regret and a like, what the fuck did I just do? How do I make amends? Like, Dexter does have a conscience, clearly, even if it is a very skewed conscience, but he does have a conscience. Whereas all the people who ripped off Dexter in real life were like, oh, I'm just going to murder somebody and wrap them up in plastic and do whatever I'm going to do. Like, there was no actual code to it. Like, these guys are like, hey, here's a cool guy I like who murders people. That's the thing, right? And it's like,
it's
really.
So weird because to me, as a non-serial killer watching Dexter, the thing to identify with, if anything, and I wouldn't say that I identify with the character Dexter, but the thing you would identify with might be the code that he has, the kind of internal conflict and the personal skewed but very real morality. I think those are the things that most of us in this world, would identify with. That's the things that the creators of the show seem to want you to identify with. What Twitchell, who, by the way, what did he write? Like a book, right? He like novella-length manifesto about how he's like Dexter. So he really fancied himself a real-life Dexter. And I don't think at any point he alludes to having any sort of code of conduct or any sort of like moral inclination. He just sort of brags about how clever he is, which also, when you hear about how he got caught, becomes really funny.
Yeah, he's just like he's like Brian Kohlberger. He's this guy who wanted to probably recreate the perfect crime, but failed miserably due to his own fucking ego. And that's what Mark Twitchell did.
You can find Mark Twitchell in a Hugh Jackman Wolverine cosplay online.
That one's so good. Incredible.
He's looking very cool.
Honestly, probably the coolest, best cosplay I've ever seen. He's just so alpha in it. He looks so good.
He looks so not like he's in an X-Men gay porn parody.
He totally doesn't look like he got that from Spirit Halloween on discount in the dumpster.
He's on the Spirit Halloween casting couch.
Yeah! Oh, God. But yeah, so just real quick, once again, as I mentioned, just failed amateur filmmaker. He moved back to Canada, found a guy on like Craigslist or some personal's ad, murdered him, covered it up extremely poorly, left so much evidence, and the police were like, oh yeah, this guy was the ultimate like suspect of all time. He just got convicted immediately, and he got sentenced to 30 years to life in prison.
My favorite thing about this, if I recall correctly, and Taylor, if there's anything I'm missing, fill me in. So after he kills this guy, right, he sends texts? Because the whole thing is that the guy...
Well, he broke into his apartment and sent emails being like, that's what it was. I went to the Cayman Islands or something with his passport and cash and everything.
I fell in love with a beautiful woman and I'm running away with her. Please do not contact me ever again.
This is not suspicious. Please disregard any concerns. I am fine. With like blood all over the keyboard or some shit. Like, embarrassingly bad cover-up. It was so bad.
Genius. That's the real-life Dexter, clearly.
Him and, God, who is the fucking guy in Madison who killed his parents? Chandler Halderson. Him and Chandler Halderson should, like, have a group chat being like, we're the worst people to ever cover up a murder of all time.
Give me a crash course here.
Okay, so we'll do another TLDR. This has nothing to do with Dexter, but real quick. So this was a guy in suburban Madison, Wisconsin, just was a total loser, totally fucking lazy, and he lied to his parents for like half a decade being like,
this guy!
Oh, I'm in school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. That guy's so cool. He's so cool. He lived all of our dream until he killed himself. Or he killed his parents.
Exactly. Yeah, he killed his parents literally on the day they found out. They're like, we're going to go to school and you're going to go to the college and apologize. Then he just immediately murdered his parents.
I mean, obviously his poor parents, because he killed them, but even leading up to that, his poor parents were just having to deal with his dumb bullshit.
Yeah, insane. Just total loser shit. But yeah, so that is the just extremely abridged story of Mark Twitchell. But you know what, Brian? I do want to get into the fictional, much cooler Mark Twitchell. I'm kidding, obviously. But the fictional Dexter TV show. So real quick, just a real crash course on the creation of the series. So the original series started in 2006 on Showtime. It stars Michael C. Hall as the eponymous Dexter Morgan. And there's, several other characters like his adopted sister or stepsister. I can't remember quite the right term at the moment. But either way, whatever. His non-biological sister, Deborah, played by Jennifer Carpenter. And you got Dexter's rival in the show, Dokes. That guy's fucking awesome. He was also in National Treasure in an episode of Malcolm in the Middle, which is really funny. I remember rewatching Malcolm in the Middle, like, oh shit, there's Dokes in here.
Dokes.
That made me laugh pretty hard. And then, just other, side characters. Like there's a pervy guy in the office who works with him who's the comic relief character. There is the most bumbling detective of all time who's always wearing like a floral t-shirt and like fucking fedora. This show rocks. It's very 2006.
Classic detective guy.
But either way, so the main conceit of the show is that Dexter is a blood spatter analyst who works for the fictional Miami Metro Police Department, which is actually the Miami-Dade Police Department, but hey, whatever the fuck, who cares? And he is a serial killer at night who hunts down murderers and serial killers and other people who got away with justice. Although technically he's only supposed to kill killers, but we'll see later in the series he definitely fails on that metric many, many times, but hey, it is what it is. The first season he's pretty consistent on killing killers. And you get to see him, try to act normal, try to be in a healthy relationship, try to balance the persona of this nerdy blood spatter analyst who is just trying to have a normal life and trying to balance that with his dark persona at night where, the only people that get to see that are his ultimate victims, or his dark passenger, as he calls it. And, for this episode, we're only covering season 1 because I want to do this as a 3-part series of prestige TV, but obviously we're not going to review 8 seasons of a TV show in a week. That's 96 fucking plus hours. That's crazy. So I was like, hey, just watch most of the first season and I think you'll get a good idea of.
I think, Taylor, it might be a good idea. First, maybe you should give just a general explanation of what we mean when we say prestige TV, and then we'll establish kind of the dynamic of this series.
Yes. So real quick, prestige TV is a kind of nebulous term. It doesn't really have a super defined thing, just like with elevated horror, right? The idea of prestige TV came about in the very late 90s, early 2000s, and it denoted a lot of, not necessarily basic cable, but definitely the premium television like HBO and Showtime.
HBO.
Yeah, and I think the first series that people would probably call prestige TV in the modern context is, I'm going to guess, probably The Sopranos. I would say
probably
it's a good
The
example.
Sopranos. I think you could make an argument for NYPD Blue, but really it's The Sopranos.
Yes, and the era of quote-unquote prestige TV, like I said, lasted from the very late 90s, early 2000s, up until I would say maybe a handful of years ago when streaming really took over, cable and premium cable's market share, and basically now all TV is elevated TV for the most part, unless you're watching, The fucking Good Doctor. Or
like the new George Lopez show or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. there is no real, I guess, self-proclaimed middle ground of TV anymore. It's now all quote-unquote prestige, or it's the lowest brow content. Just like how we've talked about how there's no middle ground or, middle brow or middle income or middle budget movies anymore. You know what I mean? It's either $200 million or $2 million. That's it. And that's very similar to TV at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good working definition of prestige television, which, as you said, is a very nebulous term. Now, I want to establish something at the beginning of this series. I hate prestige TV. I've never been able to click with it, not because any of the shows are bad. I watched more Dexter this week than I have ever seen in my life, and it was pretty entertaining. It's a good show. I watched the first season of Breaking Bad as it aired. It was good. Something about the serialized, non-episodic nature. Okay, so here's what prestige TV always feels like to me. It's always felt like it's taking the same very accessible tropes within TV, elevating them, making them, refining them, giving them more character, more premise, taking their time unfolding stories, which is all well and good. But ultimately, to me, it never feels that different from whatever other corny TV is out, which is fine because listeners of the show will know I love bad TV. I love sitcoms. I love late night TV. I have a very short attention span, and I sort of see art for me as having there's levels to it. So TV is this thing that I consume in chunks, right? And it's just kind of here and it hits me in a purely almost like a sugar rush way. Okay, this little bit of TV is hitting me. I'm getting a little story. I'm getting a little interaction with a host I like or something. And then movies for me are where I would say I invest more time and more thought. It's a full story with a beginning, middle, and end. Sometimes those are pretty short, 80 minutes. Sometimes they're about 3 hours. And then on the higher levels, for me, this is not I'm not saying this is objective or this is true for everyone, but the way that I experience art, on the highest levels, there would be records, musical albums and books, which are things that you can consume passively, but they kind of require a little bit more visualization, a little bit more connecting with, kind of thinking about myself for me to connect with them. Prestige TV, one of the things I always think is it's always taken taken too damn long. Like, it's always taken so long. And I know that's what people love about it, is that you get more time with these characters. You get to unfold. You get to live in the world. But for me, it just seems so rare that the payoff of the story is worth, the whatever 10 plus hours that I've been watching. With a movie, I watch it one time and I get a full story, whether it's good or bad. With Dexter, let's say I really wanted to get into Dexter, I would have to watch something like probably 40 hours of television. It just stresses me out to think of investing that much time in watching the same show every day or even every week. The other thing is, I always feel like this is totally like a cynical thing in the back of my head. When a show goes on too long, whether it's a prestige TV or just like a show like The Simpsons that's been going on well past its run date, I always catch myself thinking, does this show need to be going on, or is it just to make more room for the advertisement block? Because that, for a long time, was how TV was funded, right? So when I'm watching a prestige TV show and there's some plot development and I'm going, oh, this is going to fill up another 3 episodes worth of runtime, I then, in my head, I wonder, did the writers want to do this, or did they have to do it to keep the story rolling along? Now, that's a totally cynical and unnecessary thought that goes on in my head, but I did have that thought when I was trying to watch Breaking Bad. So I wonder how much of this was done slowly to unravel it, and how much was just to keep it chugging out at an even pace. Now, what I will say, having watched Dexter, is it actually moves pretty fast, at least this first season, which I was pleasantly surprised by.
Now, I will say, though, Brian, even though, of course, I am the prestige fan out of the two of us by far, I would say, quite a few prestige TV shows. And like I said, we're going to cover 3 of them on the show.
Yeah, you're kind of my prestige TV guy, because you
know
exactly. A lot about it.
I'm the prestige TV whisperer of the group, for sure.
Well, because also when I tell you, when we talk about this off mic, when I tell you what it is that kind of alienates me from prestige TV, you know what I mean, which makes it easier to talk about. Because sometimes I have friends that love prestige TV and they will say, it's so good, you just got to get 5 episodes in. 5 episodes in? That's like 4.5 hours. It should be good the first time I watch it.
Yes, and that is very true. And out of the 3 prestige TV shows that we watch, I would say all of them start off good from the jump. So there is something to be said for that. However, you did mention something that I do agree with a lot of prestige TV shows, which is the time investment actually worth the payoff at the very end? And I could tell you what, 2 out of the 3 of the ones we're going to watch, it was not worth it at all. I could tell you that much. And Dexter is unfortunately one of the 2 that it was 100% not worth the final conclusion. Now, to be clear, that's of just the original Dexter series. There are 3 different Dexter spinoffs from the main series. I would say 2 of them, and this is very controversial, is a bit of a hot take on my part, but one of them I thought had a really good one. The other one I thought was just fine. The one that was just fine, people fucking hated, arguably more so than the original ending of the show. And I've also heard that the ending of the most recent reboot is like one of the best endings of any Dexter season. So I gotta give it that time of day. I will get to that probably within the next month or 2. And the other one we're going to cover, Brian, just real quick, and we're going to talk about this one probably like 7 fucking months from now, but The Walking Dead. Holy shit, was that not worth watching. That was 100% not worth finishing. Abso-fucking-lutely not. That show was bad for half of its existence, at least. Unwatchable for half of its existence. Whereas Dexter is really only bad for like a quarter of its existence. And Breaking Bad is bad for none of it. That was the one show, in my opinion, that, and once again, we will cover that in just the first season, of course, not the entire series. But Breaking Bad is amazing from start to finish. In fact, the last episode is, I would argue, maybe the best episode of the entire series. And that is rare for a finale, especially of a long-running TV show.
When I was watching Breaking Bad, and again, I only watched the first season, and I liked it. But that's just the thing for me. It's like, if something is going to take a really long, continued investment of time, eventually I'm probably going to dip out, If it's something like, you can't like speed up the pace that you watch a TV show at, right? You can watch it every week or you can binge it or whatever, but you can't like, you still have to sit and watch it to really appreciate it. And for me, that's always going to be a barrier to entry to some point. But what I thought about Breaking Bad watching it was that it reminded me, and this might be singing its praises too highly, but at the time thinking, oh, this is kind of like a Scorsese thing. Like it's very like kind of operatic, right? What I thought watching Dexter this week was very different, where I was like, oh, this is like edgy and it's creepy and it's gory, but it kind of feels like I'm just watching, not just, it was good. It's like I'm watching the best and darkest police procedural I've ever seen.
Yes, and also, the thing with Breaking Bad, just real quick, going back to that, I'm surprised you didn't watch it more because you just missed fucking Saul Goodman showing up, played by Bob Odenkirk.
I know. Well, and that was the other thing. So I've alluded to, and I've probably mentioned it on past episodes, people are telling me, you gotta watch Breaking Bad, you gotta watch Dexter, you gotta watch One Piece. Telling me in 2025 that I gotta watch Breaking Bad is like telling me that I need to watch an anime from 20 years ago. It's like, yeah, I guess, maybe. But when it was announced years ago, people started saying, Bob Odenkirk's on Breaking Bad, you really gotta watch it now. Because my friend group knew that I loved Mr. Show. And then I really was like, no, like, why is everyone trying to pull me in here? And then you sort of go long enough without watching it that you're sort of like, I'm not gonna watch it. There's nothing you could do to make me watch it. I refuse. Which is part of my relationship at this point with Prestige TV. Is like, no, I could watch season 4 of The Simpsons again. Why would I watch this 8-hour crime drama that's probably just gonna be pretty good?
Brian, in general, I try not to throw the word contrarian around very often, but that is a very contrarian-ass take. Everybody says it's good, but I don't want to watch it. You can't make me watch it.
I know, and that's why I've been dreading the Prestige TV, because I think for the most part, I don't think I'm contrarian. But there's this thing here. This is very contrarian. If everybody thinks it's so good, it couldn't possibly be that good. If it's that broadly popular, could it possibly be that good? There's also a part of me that thinks that.
I will say, and to be fair, I definitely have had that tendency in the past. I've definitely moved away from that as time goes on.
I understand that that's an obnoxious tendency.
By the way, to be fair, I do respect that, is that no matter what anybody says, I'm not going to, because I have this distinct standard for what I find entertaining, and I do respect that 100%. I really do. It's not like where it's like, okay, well, maybe I do, and you're like, oh, maybe, fuck, this ended terribly, fuck these people, he suck. But you have this defined thing in the sand that you're just like, no, fuck, I'm not doing this.
What it is now is that I've drawn this line in the sand, but also I'm aware that all of these shows are probably quite good. Like I said, I enjoyed the first season of Breaking Bad. I enjoyed watching Dexter this week, but will I enjoy it enough to now pull back the clock 25 years? Will I have the experience that so many people had of going, Breaking Bad was a revelatory show? I just don't think I will in that way.
No, that's totally fucking fair. I mean, I remember watching it in its entirety around the time we started the podcast for the first time. But that was like a decade after it came out, and I think it still hit just as good. I think, honestly, Breaking Bad is one of those really timeless shows. Like, you could watch it now, you could watch 20 years ago or almost 20 years ago when it premiered, and I think it would still just hit just as good. But I do totally understand your viewpoint. And I will say, too, Brian, obviously I know you're never going to watch Breaking Bad, totally fine. But I will say the ultimate conclusion of Breaking Bad, right, is it's ultimately the show about how a narcissistic, manipulative piece of shit becomes evil, and on top of it, puts a hot couch guy through every circle of hell to ever exist. And he comes out on top, the hot couch guy does.
I mean, I respect that. There is not enough media that shows what hot couch guys are put through by our narcissist friends and how much it takes for us to grow and evolve and to eventually become hot mattress guys.
It's, as we always talk about the dumb guy who wants to be, like, emotional and be seen as, like, vulnerable and, like, learn lessons. And that's the thing, is that the dumbest guy you saw, like, hanging out at your local high school, like, 5 years after you graduated, or at the local, like, strip mall, who wore 5 sizes clothes too big. But he has this monumentous, like, Shakespearean fucking journey through hell.
Yeah, I like that, because that guy deserves an arc. That guy deserves to see himself on TV. Again, I think the thing that surprised me the most with Dexter, the thing that I was most interested in is, in the case of Dexter, is how it's very comfortably using like pretty traditional TV settings. I was expecting it to be maybe super grimy and super subversive, and it's pretty subversive still, but kind of deconstructionist of like TV. But actually, clearly you've got writers and producers who are very familiar with TV, who've worked on TV, and they're taking little bits from like, obviously I said police procedurals. There's little bits, obviously there's like horror elements. The crimes here are pretty ghastly. Like they are pretty horrific. But also there's this weird sense of like, there's like domestic humor, which to me was a big part of Dexter. Like that really stood out to me watching it. It was like a lot of domestic and kind of familial comedy, which surprised me.
Yes, and we've talked about Breaking Bad enough, so just real quick into the first season of Dexter. So of course this is the establishment of our character. He is once again a serial killer who goes after killers and serial killers and other people who have ended the lives of others either directly or indirectly. And he is once again a blood spatter analyst for the Miami Metro Police Department. And the very first episode we see there is a body that is discovered, an empty pool in like a shitty motel, and it's been drained of all blood and bisected into multiple pieces. At the very end of episode 1, he's following an ice truck, which a head pops, gets thrown out the window and hits his car as he's tailing the ice truck. And that's where the moniker of the killer that Dexter is facing this episode, the ultimate one, the ice truck killer. Now, you did not watch the middle episodes of this season, right? Episodes like 3 through 8, right?
I watched the first 2 episodes to be like, okay, I'm going to see the establishing tone of this story. Like, I knew the premise for the show, obviously, but I wanted to see kind of how it sets everything up. And then I watched episodes 9 through 12, because that's when I was like, well, I want to see the finale. And you had suggested watching those final 4 to kind of watch the ultimate hue of the arc.
Yes. So episodes 3 through 8 are mostly chasing, and I think they're actually entirely chasing, the red herring of the ice truck killer, who they learn is a guy by the name of Neil Perry, who's played by the actor Sam Witwer, who also plays a cameo appearance in the first episode of Walking Dead. So there's a connection there once we get to that prestige TV episode. And I love Sam Witwer. He's an amazing character actor. He was in The Mist, the 2007 Frank Darabont movie, The Mist. Of course, he had a cameo in The Walking Dead episode 1. And also, this is another fun one, he played Star Killer in the Star Wars Force Unleashed video games. He was the likeness and voice of that character, which is bizarre, but hey, whatever. So, like I said, episodes 3 through 8 are chasing the red herring. Then at the very end of episode 8, you see that Deborah's boyfriend, who she started dating a couple episodes before episode 9, is actually the ice truck killer. And he is I can't remember what the term is, but he's a prosthethologist or something like that. Somebody who puts like prosthetic limbs
prosthetics
on. And it's what's really disturbing is, you missed this in those episodes, which is fine, but he kidnaps this guard who people also think is the ice truck killer at some point, but he traps him and then starts cutting off his limbs. And every day it's like, if you don't find this guy, I'm going to cut off more and more of his limbs, and he leaves it around like parks and everything. And then you see him putting limbs on this guy, and this is a guy he just tortured for days and removed his limbs. It's really disturbing on rewatch.
And that's one of the things I think, watching this for the first time now, that's the thing that I think really sticks with people when I would hear people talk about Dexter, and then watching it now for the first time, it is grisly in a way that even cable television, I think, very rarely was or is. But I feel like describing it just as grisly, it almost does a disservice to it, right? Because the kind of shocking gore and the shocking violence, and it is shocking, it actually kind of is interspersed with a lot of character stuff, right? So when these grisly murders, these grisly acts of violence happen, they kind of jolt you back. They kind of almost push you back to like, oh, this is the reality of like the people we're dealing with.
Yes, exactly. This just dark, depraved fucking world, 100%. Yeah, definitely showing the crime scenes of it. And then, as I mentioned, we learn at the very end of episode 8 that Deb's boyfriend, Rudy Cooper, played by Christian Camargo, is the ice truck killer. And, a couple episodes after that, they go on a road trip together where Dexter interacts with his deceased biological dad, because the whole conceit of the show is that Dexter was traumatized at a very early age by seeing his mother get dismembered in a shipping container. So that's like his first trauma when he was like 2 or 3 years old. And then that, I guess, that unresolved trauma is, I guess, what also not only influences quote unquote psychopathy or sociopathy or whatever the fuck the show wants to think he is at the present moment, because each season is a little bit different. And then also the idea of protecting children and the idea of getting justice for victims and stuff. It's very complicated. It's very stupid. But either way, that is the story justification for why he does the things that he does. And then also, before we get into the ultimate conclusion of the season, I want to go real quick. So there's also flashback scenes that show him setting up this character when he's like a child, and the beginnings of the once again psychopathy, sociopathy, whatever the fuck, and he's like torturing and killing animals, and his dad decides to channel those negative emotions into things like just regular hunting and shooting guns, and eventually that's not enough and Dexter has to kill somebody. And then did you get to the parts, Brian, with the bad wig? It's so good. I love the bad wigs. Dexter, I love when he's like 17, but he's like a 38-year-old man in a bad wig.
Well, if you're gonna do a flashback, you may as well do it like that because you're not going to fool anyone. I mean, what
Honestly,
are you gonna?
They should do that in Original Sin, to be honest with you. That would have been so funny. This guy was supposed to be 18.
Just throw the wig on him. People will get it, and we'll be done with it.
Exactly. And also the Dark Passenger is played by his deceased dad, like a corporeal form, played by the actor James Remar. Of course, classic actor, great voice, great actor for this role. Although, as I told you in the chat, that Harry Morgan is the biggest villain of the TV show, bar none. And as the series goes on, that becomes more and more evident. But he is such a manipulative, shitty, awful human being that, like, in the show, they're like, oh yeah, he was so great, he was so great. And to be fair, over the show, that is very much unraveled to, like, show the piece of shit that he is. But in the first season, it's so nauseating. Everybody be like, he was a great man, but he was awful. He is the sole reason Dexter becomes a serial killer, like, in every capacity. It's amazing. He created this monster.
One of the things, you've kind of alluded to it too, and this is not actually a criticism of the show, but I think it is an important observation. Dexter is very much like a magical TV psychopath. So, Darkly Dreaming, I think I read it in 2011. It was when I first started going to college, and I think I was getting ready to move out of my mom's house. So I had a lot of free time, and I was buying books from Goodwill and reading them, and I think the show had just come out, so I hadn't watched it, but I was aware of it. In Darkly Dreaming, which this first season, as I recall, follows pretty closely, Dexter feels to me a lot more like a Bret Easton Ellis type, like, narcissist. He's a lot more unpleasant. He's a lot more, you're in his head a lot, and he's very much a narcissist. He spends a lot of time bragging and kind of demeaning the people around him in his thoughts. In the series, Dexter probably is doing that, right? Because he's a psychopath. But again, he's this kind of special TV psychopath where exactly how his brain works and how much of a psychopath he is sort of roves from scene to scene and probably from season to season. Now, this isn't necessarily a criticism. I think that ultimately probably makes for a better TV show because it makes him more, as the protagonist, more someone you would want to spend time with. But it is, I think, pretty distinct from what it seems like in the book, at least the first one, is that it is supposed to be kind of an American Psycho type, like kind of an indictment of a type of person. But in the television series, Dexter Morgan, the way he's portrayed is, I would say, a lot less off-putting. It's kind of deadpan, almost has kind of a Jim from The Office sort of vibe about him. I'm not saying that they don't portray him as a psychopath, but I think they sort of portray it from a different angle, and it's probably necessary to keep the audience engaged in him as the protagonist, right?
Yes, and you'll talk about a Jim from The Office thing when Neil Perry, the fake ice truck killer, when Dexter comes to, get his samples for DNA testing. Because the whole thing is that the first, like, half of the season is set up is that, and to be fair, a lot of the season, but the first half especially, is that the ice truck killer knows who Dexter is and is, like, stalking him and, like, putting things in his apartment or his fridge, or he even dug up a dead body of his and puts it on display at another crime scene to, like, taunt Dexter. And he's like, I know who you are, I know what you are. And Dexter thinks it's this guy, Neil Perry, the, once again, fake ice truck killer. And when he goes up to him, is like, I'm trying to get your DNA. And Neil Perry goes, who the fuck are you? He, like, stares at the camera and does the most Jim from The Office, like, turn head and, like, fake smile you've ever seen. It's so funny. It's incredible.
He definitely, and I know it's not, I'm not mocking it for it. I know it's intentional and there's intentional humor in the show. There are a few moments where I think what they're portraying, right, is the inhumanity or the different type of humanity that Dexter experiences, but there's all the times where the way that comes off is as him just, like, not entirely knowing how to respond to, the people around him emotionally, and kind of just, being very deadpan and kind of, like, unaffected, which is very funny.
And what's interesting, Brian, is that you might describe that behavior style as something that you and I have experienced many times, maybe on certain message boards and with certain lol cows that we've interacted with. It's interesting. It's almost like there's a spectrum of ways he reacts to people around him. I'm heavily implying that he's autistic. And I think there's a pretty strong argument. There's a pretty strong argument that Dexter's autistic, although some fans push back on that, but I think there's some pretty strong evidence that he's on the spectrum.
I'm sure that there are Dexter fans who are, like, very happy to listen him as autism representation.
Oh, yes, 100%, absolutely. Especially the idea of a heroic character. Although obviously not everybody in the show would see him as heroic, but
Well,
he
yeah.
does a thing that like Facebook dads are like, fuck yeah, dude, 100%. Who sit in their
So
air-conditioned F-150s are like, hell yeah, dude.
I think another thing that as the series became popular and everyone kept telling me, Dexter, is such a cool show, you gotta watch it. And there's nothing inherently like this about the premise. It's actually a pretty interesting premise, right? Because Dexter's whole deal is that he is a psychopath and he does have a killer drive. And this is a way for him to be able to act out those urges. So it's not like he's such a like moral person and he's like, Batman, I'm doing this for some greater good. He's finding a way to kind of justify his own impulse. But when I would hear people talk about this show over the years, it was kind of Facebook dad types, and they're like, it's so cool because he's like a serial killer, but for serial killers. And reading the book back in the day, but also rewatching the series now, I'm thinking, I don't really know if that's the point of the show.
No, absolutely. And, you know, once we get to the very, very last scene, so just real quick, once again, I know I mentioned that Deb's boyfriend is the ice truck killer, and they do the road trip to meet Dexter's biological dad, because, of course, Dexter's biological mom died in the shipping container where she was dismembered with a chainsaw. But Dexter's biological dad just died, and he's going to, you know, pick up their stuff. There's some flashbacks alluding to that his biological dad knew he got adopted and helped save his life at one point, and yada, yada. And then at the very end of the episode, you find out that, and it's heavily implied, I think I missed it maybe my first time ever watching the episode, but then I got it to the very end of this episode. But Rudy Cooper, also once again known as fucking Deb's boyfriend, also killed Dexter's biological dad. And you're like, why is this guy doing all these fucking things? Like, what is the thing that he's trying to get across? And then the penultimate episode is where the pieces are starting to fit more together. Batista, who once again is our fedora, you know, floral shirt cop, gets stabbed in attempted carjacking, but it turns out that it was the ice truck killer trying to just take out somebody still investigating his crimes. And then there's a prostitute who's missing a hand, who she gets killed. And then there's a videotape being sent to the police department saying, like, I killed another one, haha. And the thing is, and then at the very end of the penultimate episode is that Rudy kidnaps Deb, is threatening her, is basically going to hold her for ransom, blah, blah, or not hold her for ransom, but is basically telling her, like, oh, you know, it'll all be over soon, blah, blah, blah. How'd you not know it was me? Whatever, like taunting her, as of course serial killers tend to do. And then within the last half of that episode, you find out that Rudy and Dexter are brothers.
So I've made very clear my whole issue with the gradual unraveling of prestige TV. I watched this episode right before we recorded, and it was great. It was a good time. Do I think, for me personally, it was worth the 5 hours of television that I watched previously to set up? I'm not sure, but maybe I would feel differently if I'd watched an episode a week or an episode a night and just kind of gradually eased into it. But this was a great reveal. This season finale was a very exciting episode of television. Do I feel for me like it was some sort of elevated level of artistry on television? Not really, but it was a really damn good episode of TV. And I think for people that maybe really enjoy that sort of slow burn of like watching the story unfold and getting to meet all the characters, you go through this whole thing with the red herring, like you said, to finally receive that payoff, this big emotional twist that also isn't just a twist for its own sake, but kind of you learn something more about Dexter through it. There's a big confrontation, pretty violent confrontation. I can see how this would be a really satisfying payoff to this season of television.
Yes, and personally, I would say this is probably my favorite episode of the entire series. Now, that is not necessarily a hot take. Most people would say that the season finale of episode 4 is pretty universally regarded as their favorite episode. Although, I will admit, on my most recent watch of season 4, which I will admit is, I would say quality-wise, probably the best season of the show, but it's definitely been the hardest on rewatch because the killer in that season, the Trinity killer, is just so unrepentantly vile and just despicable that it's really hard to watch. And to be fair, that's not necessarily saying that's like a knock against its quality, but that's just saying how good John Lithgow is as the Trinity killer that I just revile even seeing him on screen. Whereas Rudy / Brian Moser, I don't really feel that way because he has a certain amount of charisma and likability, even if he is a vile serial killer. There's something about him.
He just seems like a goofy guy, right? He's got goofy guy energy.
For sure. He's somebody that like you would never like, you know, hang out with or be friends, but you're like, okay, I could see why people like him, you know what I mean?
That's a good guy. He'd be your coworker where you'd like, he's a good guy.
Yeah, whereas the Trinity Killer, like, and I've met plenty of people, like, who have that persona of that person, but maybe more, well, I've never met somebody who's killed 300
More
people.
calculated.
Yeah, but that, like, calculated, like, good guy, like, oh, I'm this really nice person, and blah, blah, blah. And then, you just meet him for, like, 5 minutes, like, behind the scenes, and you're like, oh, this person's kind of a piece
You're
of
a piece of
shit.
shit. Yep. Even, again, like, with my issues with just kind of the format, knowing that John Lithgow plays probably the scariest killer in the series, that kind of does have me interested in season 4. Not enough that I'll probably watch it anytime soon, but I might dip into, like, just because I want to see Lithgow performing like that. I can see how that would be a really great role for him and something he hasn't gotten to do a lot.
Brian, what I might do, and of course the Dexter fandom is very large, I'll find like a scene pack or something that's like 30 minutes long. You can just see all of his best scenes. How does that sound?
That's what I was wondering, and then I was like, oh, is that embarrassing to admit that I'm going to do on the show?
All right, I found one on YouTube that's 29 minutes long, so it's like, that's perfect.
And you know what? Guess what? If it's really, really good, maybe I'll watch more Dexter.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I will say he is fascinating to watch as a villain, but like I said, he's just so fucking despicable that it's been the hardest season to rewatch for me. I'm just going to be honest, because I'm like, this is so unpleasant. This is so awful. And you would think a guy who murders prostitutes, drains their blood, and cuts them up into pieces would be just as despicable, but it's just not as much for me, which is wild, but still.
Well, Lithgow might be good at that. We talked in the Elevated Horror episode about how the link between horror and comedy and how they both rely on kind of understanding how to make people uncomfortable. And that might be a thing that Lithgow is able to kind of like ease it. Because a lot of his characters, right, are nasty, like just kind of mean, sarcastic guys who are very good at being really cutting and making people really uncomfortable in their presence. And that's in his comedic roles. So I can kind of see how he might be able to take that and use that to play like a psychopathic serial killer,
Yes, and it is just so engaging as that. But either way, so going back to the very end of, once again, the last episode. So eventually, Brian/Rudy brings Deb's unconscious body to their childhood home, Dexter and Brian's childhood home, and sets up the kill table just like how Dexter likes it. And Brian/Rudy is once again just like, I know the real you and nobody else does. This fake sister of yours, she needs to be done away with because she just doesn't understand you like me, and you need to kill her and get rid of her, and then we'll team up and we'll be brothers. We'll be real brothers. And then the line that Christian says, and this really echoes throughout the entire series, is, you can't be a hero and a killer. It doesn't work that way. And that is the ultimate folly that Dexter goes through for the entire series. Every season is him trying to be normal and trying to balance this life of being a killer and trying to balance the life of being a normal, productive citizen. And in every season, it goes wrong.
That for me is what really worked watching this series. As I mentioned before, one of the things that surprised me was how much at times Dexter reminds me of a sitcom, and it kind of uses tropes of the sitcom. It has a lot of disenchanted domesticity thing that you see in sitcoms a lot. The core themes in it, other than like the serial killer stuff, is just Dexter's like inability to relate to people in a normal way, even the people that he, cares for. His, girlfriend figure, his sister, he has a hard time communicating with or understanding them in a normal interpersonal way. What makes this finale with Ice Trick Killer, who we now know is his brother, so effective is he's sort of appealing, right, to this part of Dexter that wants that connection, right? By saying that he could have that connection with him. They could share this kind of closeness that Dexter struggles to have, can't really have with anyone in his life because of his, for lack of a better word, his disorder or his disposition.
Yes, absolutely. And I love Christian Camargo in this role. He does a really good fucking job. And then the Ice Truck Killer/Rudy Brian, once again, he runs away, and then he tries coming back and killing Deb in Dexter's apartment, and then that fails. And then, of course, because Dexter is like, oh yeah, this guy who is just obsessed with me and is my biological brother, and it will basically stop at nothing to try to get me in his, his web. Like, yeah, I should probably watch out forever until I catch this guy and finally kill him. So he catches him and then puts him on Rudy's table, Brian's table, and is just like, I love you, Dexter, just do what you have to do, basically. And then Dexter kills his own brother in the way that Brian/Rudy has been killing all these prostitutes. That's one of the hardest scenes to watch, because you can just tell, like, he's just so emotionally broken up by having to do this, because he knows he can't let him live. He knows that.
Yeah, Brian is right when he says that he understands Dexter in a way that no one else ever will. Like, that is true. He's saying it in a villainous way, but that's not incorrect, right?
No, it's not incorrect. Yeah, they were both born in blood by being in the shipping container together, and Rudy and Brian's ideas continue being in blood together, but Dexter just can't abide by that. He just can't. And then after he kills Brian Rudy, sets it up as a suicide, the Miami Metro are just like, hey, whatever, it's fine. And then the very last scene, which is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show, is where Dexter has this just sort of narcissistic like daydream of everybody in Miami figuring out that he's the killer, but they're like, hey, Dexter, that's cool as shit, and they like have a whole parade for him, and that's how the season ends, which is, by the way, the only season of the show outside of maybe New Blood that has definitive ending, and it's a fantastic ending.
It's pretty well documented just by the writings of various types of narcissistic killers and interviews and confessions. A lot of them have that sort of fantasy, right? They have this sort of imagined scenario where people will discover their crimes and be like, but they're so cool, you're so smart, and you're so brilliant, and we like you so much that we aren't even mad about it. Dylan Klebold wrote things like that. Dennis Rader definitely had talked about that, how he would fantasize about how people would figure out that he was the BTK killer, and he was like, and I feel like I was such a good father and I was such a smart criminal that really, like, I don't really think it would be that big a deal. You know, that is like a recurring realistic thing that you'll see with a certain type of criminal.
No, absolutely. And like I said, perfect way to end the show. And then I do want to go real quickly into the domesticity angle that you had earlier. Yeah. So the whole thing is that Dexter, throughout the first 4 seasons of the show, is with his girlfriend / future wife, Rita, and she has 2 children. And Dexter, he uses people in his life to once again have as a shield to cover his horrible acts at night, but he has people like, you know, his friends and his family and his partner and stuff. And the series starts off with, you know, Rita is a former domestic violence and, you know, sexual assault survivor, and, you know, she is trying to rebuild her life, and she's got 2 kids from her previous husband who once again, you know, raped her and abused her in other ways, etc. And Dexter comes in and swoops in as like into Rita as like the knight in shining armor. But the thing that I don't think the series really ever, and to be fair, they hint at this, and Rita throughout her, you know, run throughout the show starts realizing this, but she still gives Dexter many chances. But Dexter is also abusive. Like, not physically, he never hits her, but he's extremely neglectful. He lies, he's manipulative, and not in a way that, like I said, he's not trying to hurt her necessarily in that way, but he is still neglectful.
No, but that's just who he is.
Yes, he lies to her, and, you know, he's always good to, like, Rita's kids and stuff, and as the show goes on, he, you know, is still in their lives throughout most of the rest of the show, even after, and, you know, spoilers, but Rita dies at the end of season 4. But, you know, even after all that, Dexter is still trying to be the parent, even after, you know, Rita dies and all that. And then also her abusive ex-husband comes back in the picture, and then Dexter, you know, assaults him to protect her and the kids, and then sets it up as, you know, he was shooting up heroin, then he gets sent to prison, and blah, 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 blah. And then in season 2, at the very beginning, it's found out that Paul died in a prison fight. So Dexter is indirectly responsible for killing Paul instead of killing Paul, the ex-husband, at the beginning of the show, because the whole thing is that, like, once again, Dexter only kills killers. And even though Paul's never killed anybody, but he still has to be done away with in some way. But Dexter still indirectly kills Paul. So his code was barely followed in that one. And we'll chalk that up to a technicality on that one.
Yeah, it's a technicality, exactly.
But that's the domesticity, is that he is using this person to try to be more normal. You know, Rita doesn't have a sex drive due to her obvious, you know, sexual and relationship trauma. But Dexter's like, oh, fantastic, I don't have to fuck this bitch.
Yeah, it's perfect for him.
I can just, like, go over and, you know, have pizza with her once a week and play with her kids or whatever, and then I can just make this last as long as possible. If you're going to be an abusive partner, I guess that's the best way to do it. I'm going to be honest. If you have to lie and manipulate to your girlfriend, that's the best way to do it.
Living the
That's
dream.
what you should. Yeah, living the dream. Not getting laid and hanging out with her kids and having to basically survive an abusive ex-husband.
Yeah, and just lying constantly and getting nothing out of it, really.
It's wild. And to be fair, in the, you know, latter seasons, Dexter finally lets that guard down. They finally have sex. They have a child at some point, Harrison, who I know fans hate Harrison and he is annoying, but, you know, he's the next generation. So, I mean, there's something to be said for that. So there's the domesticity angle. And, you know, I think we've covered a lot of season 1 so far, and I don't think there's really too much else I want to cover necessarily when it comes to the story beats. But I do want to talk about the, you know, inspiration for the various killers. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this person either, Brian, but the original inspiration for Jeff Lindsay, who was the author of the original Darkly Dreaming Dexter book, which of course got adapted into season 1 of Dexter, was the Brazilian serial killer Pedro Rodrigues Filho. Now, Brian, are you familiar with that individual?
I don't think so.
So he was this guy who was a serial killer, but for the most part, outside of maybe a handful of cases that I'm aware of, but he literally only killed other killers members and like gang members and like cartel members. Like he didn't kill prostitutes. I don't think he killed women unless they were involved in like, cartel and gang violence specifically, but he killed like 100 people over the years, and he only attacked like cartel and gang members, specifically ones who fucked with him. It's wild.
This sounds very like Facebook warrior guy.
Oh no, he really did it. I believe he was convicted of killing 71 people. Convicted. And that's not just the ones they found out about. And what's interesting about Brazil, so Brazil doesn't have a life sentence, so he got 30 years and he got released.
Holy shit.
He had a YouTube channel at one point, although he did get murdered a few years ago. The gang members finally got to him. But he went like 40 years murdering people, and he killed 71 people that they were able to verify, let alone the ones that he got away with.
That's quite the run, especially when you're fucking with like cartel gangsters.
He's not murdering like strung out like anorexic prostitutes. He's facing down some of the scariest people in that society. It's wild.
Hard to talk shit about him. I mean, I'm sure he's like a psycho and a narcissist, but it's just,
How we talked about if you're going to be an abusive, manipulative partner, if you're going to be a serial killer, I guess that's the best one to be.
Well, another thing, Taylor, that you and I used to say, if you're going to have a gut, you want a gut like Randy from Trailer Park Boys. That's the ideal gut to have. That sort of applies in this situation as well.
If you have to be, this is the best one. And then also, other serial killers in the show are based off of other serial killers. Like, for example, Trinity was based off of BTK. Although, obviously, BTK didn't kill nearly as many people as Trinity did. But that whole outward appearance of him being like a church man and a family man, but just on the inside, just being
the community
perverse.
Fucking, yeah.
Perverse
I hate
monster.
Dennis Rader so fucking much. I know it's stupid to say you hate a serial killer, but he's like the most annoying one.
Yeah.
He would write that shitty poetry, and he'd like leave it in like his would-be victims' houses. You read that? Like he had like, I think, a bachelor's in poetry, and he wrote this shitty fucking poetry.
He wrote the shitty poetry, and he'd always leave the most dad jokes ass fucking things at the crime
Serial
scene. Like when he
killer.
left like a bowl of cereal out for a victim. Like, come on, dude, fuck off. Awful human being. He's apparently dying in prison. Apparently he has late-stage dementia and like severe diabetes.
Good.
So
Fuck him.
we might not have to fucking think about him for too much longer.
One more Dennis Rader thing I've always said, even, I know how corny it is, but fuck that serial killer. He would hold women at knife point, and then he would say, I have a sexual problem. And then, he would say he wasn't going to kill them, he was going to sexually assault them, and then, but it's just, like, the whiny mewling of this meek fucking wannabe cop, right? This fucking community ranger guy with his stupid fucking bald head and his mustache and his stupid glasses going, I have a sexual problem. It just makes me angry.
Nah, he fucking sucks. Yeah, go fuck yourself, BTK. You can't die soon.
If you're listening, BTK, you are not welcome on the podcast.
Yes, exactly. A thing that BTK is very well known for is being able to listen to things that are directly referencing. Oh, Lord. So, yes, but that is all I personally have to say about season 1 of Dexter. Do we have any final thoughts before we get to our pluggables, Brian?
So what I want to say about Dexter, and I think this will be relevant in later prestige TV installments, is what you see here, what I see here is that I like television history. I like all these old genres of TV. You see Dexter taking a lot of elements from like other well-worn genres. Like I said, you see like obviously the police procedural. You see some kind of gritty film noir stuff, the anti-hero thing. This kind of like deadpan, like like domesticity and day-to-day living. There's like awkward workplace humor with Dexter and the detectives and things. What Dexter does is it finds a way to take all of these kind of familiar elements, these things that will be pretty comfortable to most viewers of primetime television, right? And it finds a way to make accessible through all of that this pretty heady, pretty violent serial killer character study. So still not a huge fan of prestige TV. I enjoyed watching some episodes of Dexter. I particularly liked the payoff in the final episode. What I find impressive really is how they got a lot of people watching this pretty involved, pretty nuanced character study who probably would not think of themselves as being interested in a story like that. It's the same thing with like Breaking Bad or Sopranos. You cast such a wide net and you get such a broad popular base to watch these movies that are basically like psychodramas, right? And you do it by kind of using the familiar, comforting tropes of TV, of the genre, of the medium, and you see like like how far can we push this? Like the phrase prestige TV, it's a little loaded, and it's, as Taylor said, it's nebulous. But I think ultimately, when people say it, that's what we're referring to, right? Is these creators who tried to use television as it existed, network television funded by advertisers who buy time and promote shows through advertising. Can we use that to tell a fuller, more serious, serialized story? Still not quite for me, not quite what I would say I watch TV for, but it's pretty impressive. And as Taylor said, it's going to disappear because with streaming, there is no reason to watch a show like this on TV. And that's why when everyone first got Netflix, these shows actually exploded in popularity, right? Because now you can binge them.
Yeah, you don't have to watch them every fucking week, just nail biting, being like, what the fuck is Trinity gonna do this time? Or is Dexter gonna find out about the Beryl and the girl's murder? Or like, who's the next one? Or whatever the fuck. Or Travis Marshall, whatever the fuck. Like, all the villains in the later season of Dexter. You can just watch like 8 episodes at once and you don't even have to think about it twice. You're just like, let me just watch another episode while you're on your like fucking 4th day of your, 4-day weekend that you took off from work.
Yeah.
The fuck. So, and then also, just real quick too. So yeah, my final thoughts. Great fucking television. I would say this is my single favorite season of Dexter. Personally, I wouldn't say it's the best in my opinion, but it's my personal favorite just because I think it's the most contained story. It's got, I would argue, my favorite villain just to watch, obviously, even though, of course, Trinity Killer and, John Lithgow is the best actual villain in the show, but once again, he's just so despicable. I just can't really watch him for extended periods of time, but I could binge the entire first season of Dexter pretty easily. And in general, yeah, it's just a great character study. It really establishes this character, and there's a reason why the show is still going on to this fucking day, because this season really, laid the groundwork. And also, I do want to mention just for 30 seconds here, the Dokes rivalry, the Dokes and Dexter rivalry gets much stronger in season 2. And if you ever do pick up Dexter season 2, it's awesome. Dokes is so fucking awesome in season 2.
Dokes is my favorite character in the show. I didn't really get a chance to talk about him. I do think that's a fun character. I enjoyed watching him. I liked whatever I saw him on screen. Didn't really feed in a lot with like kind of my general takeaway for the show and what I wanted to talk about with it, but he was just, in terms of the enjoyment I got from watching the show, those were my favorite moments, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say my single favorite scene from the entire show, and this is an obvious one, it's been memed to death for fucking 20 years, but the cargo scene or whatever, the cargo box scene, where Dokes just comes up to him, and I'll just say this in German, the Überraschung Mutafika line, and Dexter turns around like, what, are you following me now? And he's like, you have a hell of a reason to be out here. He's kind of working on a theory, and it's just so awesome.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
And then it's just a line, he's like, all right, you got me. I ordered some fucking furniture from Thailand, and it's just like, that was the best excuse you had, dude. That's awful. That's dog shit. But yeah, that scene's been memed on for fucking 20 years now, but it is a legitimately fucking fantastic scene, and Eric King is just so fucking good. Honestly, yeah, probably my favorite side character from the entire show is Dokes, and I don't really want to spoil what happens to him, Brian, but you're just gonna be like, God, really? That's it? And that's the other thing that the show ultimately doesn't get. My very final thought is the show doesn't really understand moral dilemmas. I'll just say that. The Dokes end is the ultimate example of that. I'm just gonna say that. So that is our review of season 1 of Dexter for our first part of our Prestige TV series. So without further ado, talking about prestige things, let's get into our Prestige pluggables. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please subscribe and follow us on both of our YouTube and our Spotify channels, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously to both platforms. And as well, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father campaign. Of course, our good friends Scott, Shaw, and Robert are creating a fantastic series. As of today, I saw a Facebook announcement that both Robert, Scott, I don't know about Sean. I mean, Sean lives around there, but they are in Oregon to shoot for the series of Lucifer and the Father. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah. Scott just sent me a message this morning telling me that he had just landed in Oregon. He is back in character. He is rolling. They are in Oregon. They're all there. They're all present. They're posting pictures. We're very excited for them. It is happening. Lucifer and the Father, episodes 2 and 3 are a go.
Abso-freaking-lutely. So yeah, definitely donate to the campaign. Last time I checked, I believe there's still about a quarter of the third of the way through the series, but they need more of our moral and financial support to continue to get their series off the ground and continue to make more episodes than 2 or 3.
If you were waiting to see before donating or donating again, it is happening. It is rolling. They are making these next few episodes. I've heard a little bit about the premises. I've even gotten to see little bits of Scott's like script things that he's written up. Very ambitious series. They're they want to do some real cool stuff, and it is happening. They are doing it. This is independent filmmakers, working actors, working directors, working filmmakers outside of the major Hollywood system, trying to make a cool, ambitious movie, and they are doing it. So if you want to chip in, I think Taylor and I, we complain all the time about how there's no middle class in Hollywood. There's no money for ambitious, low-budget ideas anymore. You used to be able to do that. You can't really do that anymore. Well, Sean and Scott are trying to do it. So if you want to donate, and again, we will match your donation, please go on, because like I said, they're going to make this series either way. They're already doing it, but anything we can do to help them, to support them spiritually or monetarily, we want to do. They've been great friends to us, and we want to continue to be good friends to them as well.
Absolutely. So, as always, we want Scott, Sean, and Robert's dreams to become a reality. And then speaking of people whose dreams we want to become a reality as well, and dreams of freedom, of course, we've been plugging this since it got launched, but the now official Luigi Mangione Defense Fund, Luigi, last time we saw, he had his terrorism charges dropped, which of course makes sense because, Luigi is not only innocent, but even the original, UHC CEO shooter didn't mean to fucking do terrorism, let's be honest here. I don't think he was planning on doing propaganda of the deed, whoever the fuck it was. It was just a guy who was probably pissed off. Or, it might have been a targeted thing from another insurance company. Who the fuck knows? But either way, Luigi didn't do it.
Luigi didn't do it, but whoever did it, I mean, calling that terrorism is pretty fucking ridiculous. Especially given the things that happen in this country that don't get tried as terrorism lately.
Exactly, 100%. But either way, Luigi needs our support. If you can't donate to him, and, even though both Brian and I have donated to the campaign, but if you're not able to donate to him, talk about him positively online, send him a letter, just don't do anything that just extends the negativity. That's all we can fucking say. Don't call him cringe. Don't say he's, a playboy pussy loser who is definitely guilty, because let's be honest, none of those things are true. What I just listed as a possible thing to be negative about isn't even fucking true. None of it's true.
Well, it's also like they don't have any evidence for this guy. You, as a normal person, the person that might be listening to this, you have no reason not to support him because he's just a dude that they plucked out of McDonald's and tried to pin terrorist charges on. They have no fucking evidence. What incentive do you, as a normal person in this country, which is already getting more and more fucked up every day, what incentive do you have not to support him? The only thing that can come from him being found guilty of any of these bogus charges is it'll make things worse for you and me and everyone else. So, even if you're, completely indifferent, you don't give a shit one way or the other about United Healthcare, the thing that will positively or negatively affect you is what happens to Luigi and the precedent it sets for if they can just pluck us out of a fucking fast food restaurant, out of a Starbucks, out of our place of work or wherever, because, some AI face tracking device pinned you and said that you're the most likely suspect for a crime that the cops need to close fast because they're feeling humiliated.
No, absolutely. So yeah, once again, we're going to plug the crowdfund, and just like with Lucifer and the Father, if you donate to the campaign, we will, within good reason, about $20-25 match those donations, because like I said, we want to give Luigi the best possible trial and the most possible support we can give to him reasonably. Now, if we ever become, Mr. Beast big, we're not going to be able to, donate to all the people and match those donations, obviously. But you know what? For right now, the 2 or 3 people that might donate because of us, we can throw those couple $20-25
absolutely can.
Absolutely fucking do that. And then speaking of throwing money around to people that deserve it, we also have a Patreon page. So please donate to our Patreon today. The tier that we've been plugging now since it pretty much started is the $5 tier, which is where you get every episode 2 days early, about 48 hours early, because I always say the first 48 hours are the most important. And, as we always talk about with, The Office, and we talk about with Dexter or whatever, when you're looking to watch something on your TV with your girlfriend who you just are absolutely terrified to try to fuck because you have no sex drive and you just need to put something on, put on our episode of Prestige TV that talks about Dexter, because you want to know all the details about this episode and this series, and you'll have something to talk about with your really hot girlfriend who's also a MILF that you just don't want to fuck for whatever reason because you're trying to cover up some horrible secret that you have.
Listen up, all of you podcast listeners out there. The days of gathering around the water cooler talking about prestige television, it's over. It's done. Nowadays, everyone is walking around, everyone's coming to work wondering what were Brian and Taylor talking about? What are their hot takes? What do they think about Tom Laughlin's self-published Jungian cancer prognosis books? What did Taylor think about the new Dexter series that he's probably going to watch, but we'll see. He seems to be kind of up and down with them. But you will know, and you'll be able to say around the water cooler, well, I thought the Millennials were really trenchant when they pointed out that Bamboozled is attempting to be progressive, but it's actually slightly sexist itself. You you want to have all those hot takes ready to go, we're here for you and we're putting them out there for you. Nobody cares about the TV shows you watch. They want to hear about the podcasts you listen to.
Exactly. And if you're working in a police department where everybody thinks you're weird already, get really autistic about two guys online with barely over 100 subscribers on YouTube and just talk about their hot takes.
Imagine if you were the most vocal millennials or old fan at your workplace. Imagine how mysterious you would look to the baddie receptionist that works there. You'd seem so complicated.
Exactly. The woman who is a 2 out of 10 at best with beer goggles on, but at that moment, whoo, she's looking hot right now. Whoo, boy.
Yeah, you're in the police department. What are you going to be, picky?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of picky things, Brian, do you have any pluggables as well?
Follow me at JLo Biafra on Instagram or Threads. JLOBIAFRA. It is a portmanteau of Jennifer Lopez and Jello Biafra, Singer of the Dead Kennedys. You can also follow us, the podcast, at Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram and Threads. And you can follow our Facebook page, Millennials Are Old. 3 words. The most efficient way to contact us or to contact me personally, if you have any feedback for the show, if you disagree with us, if you think we have bad takes, if you think we have good takes, if you want to send any generational cringe that you think would be relevant for us to talk about, is the Millennials Are Old Pod Instagram and Threads account. That's the one I'm going to see right away. If you want to harass me, if you would like to cyberbully me, if you want to dox me or blackmail me, I really would like for you not to do that, but that is probably the most efficient way to do it, is through following the podcast on Instagram or Threads at Millennials Are Old Pod.
Hell fucking yeah, can't wait. And can't wait to tell even more people about our show and our pluggables and everything else. But you know what?
Please tell them. We're trying to make a living here. We got to get out of the doldrums.
Exactly. We got to get out of wage slavery, wage cuckery.
I'm going to be 34 this year, guys.
Yeah, exactly. But, speaking of people who are stuck in the trenches, we're going to be stuck in our beds really soon because we're really fucking tired. And after a night of, just talking about the best fucking TV shows of all time and trying to convince Brian to watch the best TV shows of all time and to be bitterly disappointed after watching 96 hours of television.
I am going to watch this John Lithgow supercut, I think.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the 29-minute cut. I'll link it to you in the Facebook Messenger, but I think you know exactly the one you're fucking looking for. Or the one you found, I should say. But yes, either way. You know what? We're not going to be like BTK. We're not going to be like Trinity. We're not going to be like Ice Truck. Or in Season 2, we're not going to be like the Bay Harbor Butcher, who is the alias for Dexter, because they actually find all of his victims, which is awesome. They find all of his victims in the ocean. And that's the ultimate thing, is that Dexter has to avoid being blamed as the Bay Harbor Butcher in Season 2. That's why Season 2 is often considered the second best season, although I personally think it's the third best season, but it's still really fucking good. It's very entertaining, and it's ultimately Dokes versus Dexter basically the whole season. It's great. Just fantastic.
I may do more Dexter deep diving in about 5 years. We'll see.
Hell yeah. But speaking of deep diving, I'm going to be deep diving in my bed soon and not thinking about the girlfriend that I'm just desperately trying to avoid fucking because I just need to seem more normal. And not having a sex drive is the most normal thing you could do as a man. Have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight and don't let any of Dexter's serial killer nemesis bite. Have a good night, everybody.